I just spent the last few days poring over every node group, and all of Blender's new hair mechanics, and wow, just hair is hard, but it's all right. I figured it out. I now have a rock solid workflow that anybody can use to make almost any hairstyle. Sounds like a cool idea? Let's try it out. First, let's talk about the workflow steps. It's super easy, so don't worry about it. Step 1, gather your references. Step 2, plan your grooms. Step 3, style your grooms. And step 4, your geometry nodes setup. Step 5, fine-tune to chef's kiss. See, I told you it's really simple. In just 5 steps, you will be equipped to make pretty much any hairstyle that you can imagine using Blender's new super amazing hair system. Here I have this scene with a cyberpunk character to demonstrate a pretty cool hairstyle that you can create, something like this. And don't worry, I put a link to download this blend file with this exact character and scene in my Patreon, which is totally free, by the way, and you don't need to pay a cent. Right off the bat, you might be tempted to load up this scene and then start working off of your imagination. This is a very bad idea. The problem is your memory is not reliable. The idea of the hairstyle in your head is going to be pretty vague. And this is where step 1 comes into the picture. Step 1 is about gathering references which you can use to construct the hairstyle that you're looking for. My favorite tool for that is PureRef. So I'm just going to load up PureRef. Just search PureRef and you can download this. And I'm going to load up some references that I've got. Ideally, you want to go to places where you can find images of references. You can search. My favorite places are ArtStation and Pinterest. And I can find a lot of different hairstyles, a lot of different things pretty easily. I already know I wanted to create a cyberpunk looking hairstyle. So I've already gathered a bunch of references over here with different hairstyles. Okay? Just so you know, I used this particular character to sort of design the hairstyle over here as much as I could. But I also added in a little bit of other stuff that I thought was interesting. Generally, it's a good idea to look for images of hairstyles that you have a general idea of what you're trying to create. Like, I know I want to create a cyberpunk character, so I'm looking for cyberpunk images. It helps if you can find different angles of the same hairstyle, and that'll give you like an idea of what that hairstyle would look like from the back, from the front. You won't always get an opportunity to have that, but it's good to have that. Another important thing is always try to find hairstyles of realistic characters. Even if you go for a stylized character, try to find some additional references of realistic characters, like I've done here. Like, this was the reference image that I'm going to use to make this, but I also found like more realistic looking hairstyles so I can get an understanding of what hair might look like, because the hair details here are very vague. You don't see a lot of the details, just the shape. That's something you want to consider when you're looking for references. Now that I've got my references, the next step is I have to go into the planning my grooms stage. And there's a few tips that'll make this stage very easy. First, let's go into unshaded mode or solid shade mode, and let's hide these different grooms. I'm going to hide the background as well. I'm going to hide the camera so you just see the character's head. Cool. Well, the first step is to plan my grooms. This is where you have to look at your references. Now let's pull up our references right here. And I know I'm going to create this particular hairstyle. Maybe not exactly, but I want to have something that looks a bit like this, a bit like my original. I need to think about how I'm going to comb these hairs. Imagine for a moment that you're just starting from scratch and you just put a bunch of hairs and you start combing. You just start combing, and just put a lot of hairs all over and you just start combing. You will quickly realize that it's pretty difficult to comb some parts while you're combing the other parts. Yes, you can use the selection brushes, but it's still pretty hard. This is a painful process, and this is the result of not planning properly. Here's a tip that's going to change your life. Don't make a single groom. I mean, it's so simple, it's stupid, but it will transform your grooming. Once you realize this, you don't have to make a single groom. You can actually, and by groom I mean the hair objects. You can add multiple hair objects that at the end of the day is just one head of hair, but it's made out of several pieces. That's the first tip. Now the second tip is, in order to do that, I actually found a really simple way of sort of planning this in advance. So we're going to do that right now. I'm going to select this annotation tool. And then I'm going to make sure that it is set to surface. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to plan out, and I'd like to do this in shaded mode so I can see the scalp. I know that I want a clump of hair, this part of the hair, okay, to be somewhere here. So let's try that. Let's just draw a circle, like something like this. And this is kind of telling us, okay, this front clump is going to be here. And then we want another set of hair that goes from there all the way back to the head, back of the head. So for that, I'm going to use a different color. I'm going to add a new note. Let's call this like front. Okay, I'm going to add a new one, left side. Okay, and left side is going to be like red, and the left side is going to be something like this. I'm just going to draw around here. Okay, it's gonna be in this way. Okay, really cool. If I want to erase it, I can just go to this eraser and I can just sort of erase a line like this. Now I'm gonna make another one called middle. Just mid's fine. And let's make this like green, somewhere like this. And it's mostly going to be on the top of the head. The last one is right. Okay, and right's going to be something like pink. I'm just going to shade these like this. Cool. Now we have a color-coded plan for how we're going to make these grooms. This might feel like an extra step that's just wasting time, but trust me, it will save you so much heartache and pain and a lot of time down the road once you start grooming. To add a groom is really simple. We just we make sure that we select the object, press Shift A, go to curve and add an empty hair. And when we do so, underneath the character, which is underneath this predefined version, underneath the body, we've just added a hair curve. Now I'm just going to call this, you might want to get started on this side or the front side, but I actually prefer to get started on the hair that's going to be underneath. Now if you see, this particular hair is being combed in this direction. I could add this and start combing, but then this group of hair will be underneath this group of hair. And that can create some problems when I need to comb the first hair. So to make it simple, I prefer to start from the group of hair that's going to be underneath everything. First of all, make sure that your hair group is selected, and then press Tab and go into Sculpt mode. You can also go into Sculpt mode here. I'm going to be using the Add brush. You can adjust the settings of any tool here by going into this option here, and it gives you all the settings of this tool. And I just need to adjust the length and points. That's all you need to care about. Now notice if I add one hair, it's really tiny. And that's because my character is not properly sized. My character is actually huge. So I need to adjust the length to fit my character. Ideally, you want to make sure your character is appropriately sized to a realistic value. Let's try 5 meters. That seems okay. Let's try like 6.5 meters, right? And I'm going to increase the points from 8 to 12. This is not strictly necessary, but it'll help you down the road. My goal here is to make sure that I fill up this circle, but I don't want to fill it up super dense. I just want to make sure that I have a few hairs, so I'm just dotting it around, more or less evenly spaced. There we go. So that's what I want. The reason I'm adding only a few of these and not like completely covering the head is because using these curves as guide curves. The idea being you can't really create millions of curves on the head. It's too much curves to deal with. The performance impact is really high. So you want to work on a few hairs, which we call guide hairs, and then interpolate them and fill in the gaps, basically. I'm going to create these guide curves, and I'm going to try to brush it more or less in this shape, but not exactly this shape. Now, this part is the fun bit. So my recommendation is to just put your headphones on, put some music on, grab a coffee, and just enjoy this process. Because it's a pretty simple process, I'm just going to time-lapse through this. I'm using the main brush and the comb tool. I'm making sure that I'm using a pen. So I'm making sure that the pen pressure is on. You don't have to use a pen, but it helps a lot. And I'm just going to start combing. Okay, so here's another tip. I don't want this to intersect the mesh, and there's a way to do that. And that's a setting here called collision distance. I know that because my model is humongous, I need to increase this to 0.1, but if you have an appropriately sized model, the default should work. You can also adjust it and see how it works for you. I would like to now see what that looks like interpolated, because it's kind of hard to tell whether it's looking like what I want it to look or not. So what I want to do is I want to make sure I add a new geometry node system, which we will build on later in step 4. And I'll just name it. I'm going to add a new one. I'm going to call it the same thing. And we're going to switch over to Geometry Nodes workspace right here. I'd like to just see it as well. So this is what we see. Just drag a new screen, switch to your asset browser, and in your asset browser you'll probably have something called hair. You'll have these different geometry node groups that has been set up by Blender themselves. The Blender Foundation has already created all these different groups that allow you to create pretty much any hairstyle that you can think of. The one I'm looking for is the one that's titled Duplicate Hair Curves. It looks like this. I want to bring that in. You'll see a change immediately. Unmute, you can see what's happening. It's actually creating a duplicate hairs around this, and I can change the amount, like the radius, like this. So I like to do something like this, and you can already see, oh, wait a minute, that's kind of like what we were expecting, right? And we can increase this to like 100. Okay, so that means for every guide curve it adds 100 interpolation curves. One thing I like to do is I like to drag this in here so that we have the measure here, so at any point we can just control the amount on viewport, so that when we're sculpting we don't need to see all of them. We can just see this and then bring it back up to see how things are looking. If I increase this too much, you can already see something weird's happening. They're no longer attached to the head. We can fix this by using another node called Attach Hair Curves to Surface node. That's the next thing I want to bring in. I want to bring in and attach it here. As soon as I do that, nothing's going to happen, okay? Because I need two things to be added here. The first one is I need to select the object that we want to attach it to, and then everything disappears. What happened? That's because it also needs to know what the UV map is. You can do this by adding just type named attribute, and then we change this to vector, and then we make sure that we select the UV map. How do I know what the UV map is? Well, I need to make sure that I select my object. I need to go to data, UV maps, and I can see the UV map is called channel 0 in my model. In your model, it might be called UV map or something else. Name it channel 0, exactly as it's named here. Capital C, channel 0, drag it into surface, and I'm fine. Then what I want to do is I want to just slightly increase this so that it bends slightly along the curve. So now even if I were to increase the radius, it will always be attached. I don't want to increase the radius too much. I just want a little bit that gives me the impression of, okay, this is how these different guide hair clumps are going to look like, which is fine. So now we need to do this same process for the other groups of hair. Okay, so now we want to make sure that we can visualize this as well. So let's go back to object mode. If you're wondering why this pie menu, I'm using Machine Tools add-on, so you don't have to use that. You can just use this menu if you want. I'm going to be adding a modifier, geometry nodes. Once again, I'm going to be renaming this. What did I name the other one? The same name. Okay, and I'm going to be adding in the same node name I came up with here. So my cyberpunk hairstyle, right? I want to make sure that I add that same thing. I'm not adding a new one, I'm just adding the same one. Okay, this will make sure that it has the same settings as this one. I made a mistake by not increasing the control points. Now this one's longer and I need to make sure that they have more control points. So now it's too late for me to adjust the control points, but there is a way. And the way is to add yet another geometry node system. This is a temporary one, just a new one. Then go to geometry nodes, and I'm just going to add in a resample curve, okay? Now, we initially had 12 points. I want 20 points, let's say, okay? Almost twice as much. And if I add it, it's not going to have any meaningful effect. Even if I comb it, it just still feels like 12. What the problem is that I need to make sure that I apply this geometry node system. So I'm just going to right click and say apply. That's the only way that you can increase the number of points. It's a little tedious. That's why I always recommend that when you're adding these curves, try to think about how much points you actually need. If it's a long ponytail, you definitely need more than 8 or 12 points. You might need 24 or even 30 points. Let's go back to our geometry node setup and let's be able to control that a little bit. We want to bring in the amount and the radius by just dragging it into the inputs. This will give me the ability to, from this screen, just decide, okay, you know what, 100 hairs per clump is a little bit too much. So let's increase that, and let's change the radius as well. Maybe we can increase the radius or decrease it. Okay, so now I have the general shape, but it's not quite looking the way I want it to look, right? So there's a little bit more tweaking that we can do. Now, the other thing is it's getting a little difficult to see the hairs properly because I have these zones marked out, and I want to hide those. So that's pretty easy to do. I just have to go here, and under here I can just hide them this way by clicking the annotation tool. We need to start with the next step, which is step number 4 before we can move forward. One thing I need to do now is I need to look at my reference image and see what's missing, what kind of styling are we missing in order to create this, something that looks similar to this reference. The first thing is I noticed that there's clumps, like in this hair, even though it's a stylized hair, you can still see there are these clumps, these little waves and leaves, sort of clumps of hair, and they clump together in discrete segments, and that's what I want to imitate. So let's try starting with that. And to do that, I'm going to go into my geometry node setup, or the geometry nodes workspace, and I already have my hairstyle selected right here. Remember, all the hairs are using this same system, right? So as long as I apply it here, it should share the effect across all of them. I'm going to use one of these things. One of these node groups is called clump hair curves. I want to drag that in and put it in here. And I'm going to just drag it in and drop it here. Something is happening. Let me just mute this by pressing M. And you can, and you can see, look at how things are clumping together. The way this hair clump thing works is, this hair clump node works, you have a few settings here. So this factor is what determines, like, basically how much clumping do you want, like 0% clumping, 100% clumping. It's also using a sort of guide map. Basically, it's clumping based on some guides. Currently, it's trying to use this guide mask, which is sort of a default guide distance, right? But I want to disable this, okay? And when I disable it, you see it stops clumping. And if I were to increase this distance, what I'm doing is I'm actually creating clumps which are changing by the distance. So for example, right now, it kind of looks a bit like an anime character or a Dragon Ball Z character, just because the clumps are like quite large. it's like you have this individual hair, and that's the guide, and then there's all these other hairs within a certain distance of this individual hair is going to be selected as the as one clump, and anything outside of that distance will be selected by the next nearest guide hair. So that's the idea. Now what I want to do is I want to make this a bit smaller, because you can see the clumps are kind of big but not this big. So let's make this something like 1, maybe 1.5, 1.2, something like that, and we can get some variety. And already we have a whole cool looking style right now, but you might notice that these clumps are really like pointy, and that doesn't look so good. So we can use this tip spread to sort of spread them apart. I just want to separate these clumps just a little bit, okay, just something like this. I'm also going to now that I've increased that distance, I'm just going to increase this tip spread so it looks a little bit better, and we have this kind of these shapes right now. Even though the clumping has helped a lot, we can also offset these clumps just a little bit, like it just offsets the distance, and it can create these pretty cool shapes. I mean, this is pretty cool on its own. Maybe a different character would have like this kind of style, but for my character I just want to offset just ever so slightly, just to give a little bit more variety to their hair, right? Clumping is just the first step. We now need to go to the next level. If you look at these hairs, for example, yes, this is a clump, but it's also curving in, it's sort of rotating inward. That's another factor that this hairstyle has. So I want that as well, and there's an option for that over here called roll hair curves, and I want to drag that in. Okay, so I just drag in this roll hair curves in, and I drop it here. The main controller here is the roll length. The roll length and the roll radius is how you're going to control this, right? Right now, the roll length determines along the hair how much is rolling. So for example, if I just go in real close and go here, you can see that it's only rolling these little tips. I'm going to change this by increasing this roll length so it rolls more of the hair along the length of the curves. Now, an important thing to notice is that it's rolling at a really tiny radius. So that's not what I want. I want it to increase this radius from 0.5 to, let me just increase it and show you what I mean. Do you see what I just did there? When I increase the radius, I'm actually increasing. It can roll more. If I decrease it, it'll roll more. If I increase it, it'll roll less. It'll be a softer curve. And that's kind of what I want. I kind of want it to be a softer radius and roll more along the hairs, right? Cool. Now, one important thing is there's an order of operations here. Like right now, I have duplicated my hair first, and then I'm attaching it to the hair body, and then I'm going to clump it, and then I'm rolling the hair. But in this particular situation, I actually want the roll to happen on the individual hairs first, and then clump it, and then, basically then duplicate it and then clump it. So let me take this out by pressing Alt and selecting, and bringing it somewhere here. Do you see that? Now, you'll notice that it's rolling without messing up the clumps. But if I were to put it on this side, right, and decrease the roll radius, it's messing up the clumping, which I don't want. Okay, so I'm going to put it here. Now it's a little bit too much. Okay, so let me just tweak this. You might notice that I added this vector here, and I connected to this roll direction because I want to roll the hair downward, and I adjusted this random orientation so it slightly randomizes as well. And because I want the hair to roll downwards, I think the roll radius is too much. So do you notice how it kind of goes downward in this direction? Now we can start combing it the other way and see how things evolve from there. So we are a little bit closer now. It looks a lot more interesting because there's separation here, there's sort of clumping here. How can we take this further? What's the next thing that we could do? Well, one of the things that I like to do is I like to add a little bit of hairs that sort of, like, it's very perfect and very uniform, which is fine, but if you look closely, you'll see these smaller little hairs that sort of sticking out a little bit here and there and kind of breaking this pattern a little bit. And how we could do that is by taking a new stream of hair from here, okay, and then merging it down the line. So we're going to add a join geometry nodes here, join geometry, and then I'm going to drag this in and put it in here, and I'm going to neaten this up a little bit like this. Already we can see something has happened. but we want to mess them up a little bit. We want to kind of make them a bit jittery so that they move. I want to add this hair curves noise node. And once I add this in, we're gonna want to focus on the small hairs for now. So I'm just going to break this so we can only see those little small hairs. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to increase the distance so I can just slightly alter their positions just slightly, and I'm just going to bring this in just to see how it looks. Okay, it's kind of looking okay. Let's just alter their distance just a bit more. That's fine. Let's see if we can keep the scale down just a little bit. Okay, that seems okay. Let's also see if we can duplicate it again this way. Okay, I'm thinking we could do this and this, but I don't want 100, I want something like 3. Let's break this a bit, see how things are looking. This is how it looks. Add that in there. Great. We can just mute these for now. We don't need to worry about this. I also want to see if I can use this rotate hair curves. I just want these to come out just a little bit. Randomize it just a little bit. Okay. Bring this down to something like 1, that should be okay. And bring this back in. It's a bit too much, so let's reduce its effect. And what I'm doing here is I'm just adding all these tiny little hair curls that's sort of changing the little shapes a little bit, breaking things up, adding a little bit of more realistic looking hairs that stick out in different ways, right? Now we're getting a little bit messy, so let's start organizing a little bit, right? This is going to be, we're going to add a frame. We're going to call it main hair system. We're going to bring these into the frame, and we're going to keep this frame here. We're also going to add another one, frame, all this, or we could call it loose hair systems. Drag that in there. And we now have 2 different systems making up our interesting hairstyle. Okay, really cool. Now, what else can we do? Okay, so there's one more thing we can do for both of these, especially the main hair system, that would really enhance its look. You might notice that every single hair is perfectly uniform in length, and that's not what we want. We actually want a variety of lengths for our hairstyle. How are we going to achieve that? Well, there's another node here called trim hair curves. Let's drag that in, and as soon as I do that, it trims everything. It replaces the length, which is not what I wanted to do. But what I really wanted to do is I wanted to have a scale factor. So I can increase its length or decrease its length. Mainly, I want to decrease its length. I can just slightly decrease the length to like 0.79 or something like that, and get a variety of sort of tiny shortenings, which is fine, maybe 0.85, which is better, or maybe 0.75, something like that, yeah. Because you want to vary per hair, you can use a random value like this, right? And it will just sort of shorten everything between 0.55 and 0.6, but it might be doing it a bit too much, so I don't want it to be so much, so I'm going to reduce this mask to like halfway. So half of these hairs are going to be shortened slightly by this trim hair curve, which is really cool. We can also apply this at this scale instead of this scale. So this is making sure every hair is shortened. If I duplicate this and bring it back here, I could actually, oops, connect it properly. I'm actually now shortening the guide curves themselves, right? Now, one thing you might notice is the hair it's first of all, it's white, and second of all, it's really thick. It doesn't look, I mean, real hair isn't this thick. There is a node here called the set hair curve profile, which I will be adding after all of these together so that we can control the thickness of all the hairs at once. Nothing happens. And that's because this hair node does not operate on EV. It only works in cycles. So let's switch over to rendered mode and make sure that you're in cycles. Switch to cycles, you will see a small difference. You might see that. Let's go closer. You might see that the tips of the hair, the tips of the hair are really thin, and it gets thicker as you go down, just like real hair would. And that's because of the factor given here. The maximum factor meaning the thickness, and the thickest point is at the bottom, and the minimum factor is 0, which is at this point. If I increase this to 1, you'll see instantly that the tip becomes thick. That's not what we want. We want this to be 0. It looks pretty decent. One solution for this would be to simply comb this backwards, trim this part, have just a single new groom, which is just supposed to be the hanging hair piece, and we can set that up differently than everything else, putting a different system, and then we can apply the modifier and make that like its individual thing so that you can perfectly get the shape, because that's a hero piece of the hair. This is sort of a hero element of the hair. It's the most important visual element of the hair, so you might want more manual control over that. But for the rest of it, you can continue to use this procedural method. One thing I like to do is I like to quickly slap on a material just to see how things are looking in cycles with the material on. And I already have a simple material set up, pigtail hair kind of, right? It's a basic material that I'm slapping on here, and it just gives a pink to teal look, and you can just change the color. So let's just, here you can kind of see the different colors. What we can do is we can change this color. Maybe we don't like pink, we want a bluish greenish tone, or a really tealy look, or a yellowy look, and you can choose your colors with this system. It's pretty simple, and it's freely available in the Blender file that I've given you on my Patreon, which you can use. It's kind of a version 1, 0.1. I'm still researching how to get the best sort of master shader. Now this seems like the end, but actually we now need to move into step 5, which is fine-tuning to chef's kiss. That's the fun part, because everything I taught you right now, from the geometry node setup over here, the 2 different systems, creating the main hair system, creating the small tiny hair systems, creating these little trimming systems, all these different things. In step 5, what we're supposed to do is we're going to adjust all these settings, recomb the hair. Now that we can see it visually, we can just recomb it, tweak it. You can just keep tweaking, adjust the clumping. Maybe you want more clumping. You can just keep perfecting it until it's absolutely chef's kiss. That's it, friends. That's my workflow. I promise if you use this workflow, you will find almost any hairstyle is not just doable, but quite easy. If you've been struggling with this new hair system, you'll feel a huge confidence boost after this workflow. Use your new powers responsibly. If you found this video helpful, be a dear and give it a like, would ya? If you didn't, you're probably a total noob and some of the words I said went over your head. Good news for you is that I'm working on a new video that's made just for you that'll go over every concept, brush, node, basic technique of Blender's geometry nodes hair system. It's a 0 to hero type of video, so subscribe and hit the notification bell so you won't miss that one. Alright boys, I will see you on the flip side.